Welcome to episode 56 of the Southern Conservative Podcast. My name is Ty. I have neglected to talk about the Robert Mueller special counsel investigation for some time now, and so I want this entire podcast to be devoted to the special counsel investigation. Before I start, I want to remind everyone to please check out my Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/southernconservative. That's facebook.com/southernconservative. There you will find links to conservative news articles on stories you may not hear about in the mainstream media. Plus, if you follow the news feed, you'll find links to the daily podcast. Be sure to also subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the notifications bell so you'll be alerted each time a new podcast has been posted. New podcasts are posted daily, Monday through Thursday. Remember several months ago when Rod Rosenstein publicly announced that the special counsel had indicted certain Russians and Russian companies for interfering in the 2016 election. At that time, many people said it was just for show. It was just a way for Robert Mueller to show that he was indeed investigating Russian collusion. By this point, he had already secured guilty pleas from Paul Manafort and Rick Gates on things that have zero to do with Russian collusion in the 2016 election. Mueller had also gotten a guilty plea out of Michael Flynn for lying to the FBI, even though James Comey and FBI agent Peter Strzok both believed that Flynn never lied to the FBI, despite what Comey has been saying on his book tour. So this indictment into the Russians and Russian companies was to provide cover for Mueller and to make it look like the special counsel was on the straight and narrow. Many people also thought this was just a waste of time because Mueller would never be able to get a conviction, and there would never be trials because the Russians would never respond to the indictment. Well, one of the Russian companies indicted, Concord Management and Consulting, has responded to the indictment and is giving it right back to Robert Mueller. According to the Daily Caller, foreign interference in the presidential election is a make-believe crime, Concord Management and Consulting said in a court filing on Monday. The company argues the case is an example of Mueller attempting to justify his own existence by indicting a Russian, any Russian. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has rejected the history and integrity of the DOJ and instead licensed the special counsel, who for all practical political purposes cannot be fired, to indict a case that has absolutely nothing to do with any links or coordination between any candidate and the Russian government, Concord wrote in the court filing. Concord's lawyers also petitioned the judge to review the instructions Mueller's team gave the grand jury in securing the indictment. Then the Daily Wire has a report out that Mueller's team may have indicted a company that didn't even exist at the time Russian interference happened. U.S. Magistrate Judge G. Michael Harvey asked one of two lawyers representing the accused Russian company, Concord Management and Consulting LLC, if he was representing a third company listed in Mueller's indictment. What about Concord Catering, the judge asked. The government makes an allegation that there's some association. I don't mean for you to, do you represent them or not today? Are we arraigning them as well? We're not, the lawyer responded, and the reason for that, Your Honor, is that I think we're dealing with a situation of the government having indicted the proverbial ham sandwich. That company didn't exist as a legal entity during the time period alleged by the government. If at some later time they show me that it did exist, we would probably represent them. But for purposes of today, no, we do not. So at least as it appears now, Mueller was totally unprepared for this company to answer the charges brought against it. But now this allegation that Mueller indicted the wrong company leads to a conclusion that Mueller was simply trying to save face when people started making accusations that the special counsel had gone totally off the rails and had open rein on investigation wherever it wanted to go. Mueller never thought anyone would respond to the indictments. Now Mueller's team is going to have a legal battle on their hands, and some believe Mueller will ultimately be forced to drop these indictments. We'll have to see. Then we have the story out there that the FBI had planted a mole within the Trump campaign in order to conduct surveillance on the Trump campaign. And there are many outlets out there reporting that they believe the mole is a 73-year-old British professor with ties to the CIA and the MI6. His name is Stefan Halper. I've talked about in previous podcasts how George Papadopoulos, a young advisor to the Trump campaign, met with a professor in London by the name of Joseph Mifsud in April 2016. And this professor told Papadopoulos that Russia had been in possession of thousands of emails from Hillary Clinton. The next month, in May 2016, Papadopoulos is in a London bar, and he's drunk, and he's talking to the Australian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Alexander Downer. And Papadopoulos tells Downer what he had learned from Mifsud, that Russia hacked Hillary's emails and was in possession of them. Downer relays the information to the Australian government, who then gives the information to the FBI. Well, fast forward to September 2016. Halper wanted Papadopoulos to come to London. Halper had made a proposal to Papadopoulos to write a paper on issues involving foreign policy matters with Turkey, Cyprus, and Israel in exchange for $3,000. Papadopoulos accepted the proposal and went to London. He ultimately delivered by submitting the paper on October 2, 2016, and he received the $3,000 payment. But while he was meeting with Stefan Halper, Halper asked him, "George, you know about hacking the emails from Russia, right?" Papadopoulos told Halper he didn't know anything about the emails or the Russian hacking. And Papadopoulos really doesn't know anything. In fact, it has yet to be proven whether Russia hacked Hillary's emails. Remember, Papadopoulos was fed this information from the London professor Joseph Mifsud. Of course, Papadopoulos thought it was odd that Halper would ask him about this. Now remember, none of us had heard anything about George Papadopoulos until Robert Mueller had him plead guilty in October 2017 to lying to the FBI. October 2017 was the first time the public knew who George Papadopoulos was. It wasn't until late December 2017 that the New York Times reported the whole matter concerning Papadopoulos and how he learned from Joseph Mifsud about Russia supposedly hacking Hillary's emails. And then Papadopoulos tells this to Alexander Downer one night when he's drunk in a London bar. But more than a year before that article was published, Papadopoulos is asked about Russian emails and hacking by this man, Stefan Halper. How does Halper know about the Russian hacking, and why was he asking Papadopoulos this? Well, Halper has connections to the CIA. Could it be that Halper was in communication with then CIA Director Joe? Could it be that Halper was in communication with then CIA Director John Brennan, who would have been in communication with James Comey at the FBI? This whole thing involving Stefan Halper is something Devin Nunes wants the DOJ to confirm. So Mueller got Papadopoulos to plead guilty to lying to the FBI. But again, we still do not have confirmation that Russia hacked Hillary's emails. Papadopoulos just got caught up in all of this. But it makes you wonder whether Joseph Mifsud and or Alexander Downer was or were also FBI informants. Mifsud is the one who originally told Papadopoulos about Russian hacking, and Papadopoulos told this to Alexander Downer. Now, the whole meeting and exchange at that London bar couldn't have just been happenstance. I think Downer wanted Papadopoulos to blab this to him, so Downer got him drunk in a London bar, and Papadopoulos told Downer what Mifsud had told him about Russian hacking. So there you go. That's the start of the FBI's investigation into Donald Trump. But again, remember, there's no confirmation that Russia had hacked Hillary's emails. WikiLeaks released emails from John Podesta, Hillary's campaign chair, but Julian Assange, who runs WikiLeaks, maintains that no state actors were involved. The bottom line here is this whole thing looks like a trap, and it's important that congressional investigators get to the bottom of whether Halper was a mole inside the Trump campaign, and whether Mifsud and or Downer were also FBI informants. Lastly, as I finish up the final podcast for this week, John Solomon has an explosive story at thehill.com in which he describes Mueller having a conflict of interest in regards to a Russian oligarch and the special counsel investigation. You can read the entire piece by John Solomon. I'll post a link in the article in the description box below this video. But basically, Oleg Deripaska had put up millions of dollars of his own money to pay for a mission to rescue a CIA operative who was captured in Iran back in 2007. His name is Robert Levinson. The man is still missing to this day, by the way. Anyway, the mission wound up going south, and you can read all about that for yourself. But the FBI rewarded Deripaska for his help. Despite not working for the Russian Foreign Ministry, Deripaska visited Washington, D.C. in 2009 on a rare law enforcement parole visa. And since 2011, he has been granted entry into the United States on a diplomatic passport at least 8 times. Well, more recently, we have learned about this man's ties to Paul Manafort. According to John Solomon, Deripaska once hired Manafort as a political advisor and invested money with him in a business venture that went bad. Deripaska sued Manafort, alleging he stole money. Robert Mueller's indictment of Manafort makes no mention of Deripaska, even though prosecutors have evidence that Manafort contemplating inviting his old Russian client for a 2016 campaign briefing. Deripaska said he never got the invite, and investigators have found no evidence it occurred. There's no public evidence Deripaska had anything to do with Russian meddling. Deripaska also appears to be one of the first Russians the FBI asked for help when it began investigating the now infamous Fusion GPS Christopher Steele dossier. 2 months before Trump was elected president, Deripaska was in New York City as part of Russia's United Nations delegation when 3 FBI agents awakened him in his home. During an hour-long visit, the agents posited a theory that Trump's campaign was secretly colluding with Russia to hijack the U.S. election. Deripaska laughed, but realized that they were serious. So Deripaska told them, in his informed opinion, that the idea they were proposing was false. "You're trying to create something out of nothing," he told them. The agents left, though the FBI sought more information in 2017 from him. So what's the point in all of this? Well, we know that the FBI relied heavily on the salacious Christopher Steele dossier to get warrants to spy on Carter Page. And the source of the information in that dossier was from Russians. All of this to try and prove Trump was colluding with Russia. But did the FBI disclose to the FISA court that there was a Russian source who refuted the notion that Trump colluded with Russia to overthrow the 2016 election? John Solomon also writes, the U.S. government in April imposed sanctions on Deripaska, one of several prominent Russians targeted to punish Vladimir Putin, using the same sort of allegations that the State Department used from 2006 to 2009, alleging Deripaska was involved in organized crime. Yet between those 2 episodes, Deripaska seemed good enough for the FBI to ask him to fund that multi-million-dollar rescue mission, and to seek his help on a sensitive political investigation, and to allow him into the United States 8 times. And as it turns out, Deripaska was not one of the Russians indicted several months ago by Robert Mueller. This guy provided financial resources to the FBI in the past, and now is a witness in the Manafort investigation. Now, the judge in the Manafort case has already questioned the motives of the special counsel, saying that the investigation has nothing to do with Trump-Russia collusion to overthrow the election. So the Manafort case is already on shaky ground. And the entire investigation into Manafort is ridiculous in the sense that Mueller should never have gone after Manafort because it's clearly outside the scope of the special counsel's investigation. Plus, the authority given to Mueller by Rod Rosenstein to go after Manafort came after the FBI raided his condo. So the whole Manafort probe is slimy, to say the least. But if you're Manafort's defense, You'll definitely want to raise all of this as an issue, as Mueller clearly did not come forward and has not come forward with his ties to Deripaska. Remember, Mueller was the director of the FBI at the time Deripaska handed over millions of dollars to fund that rescue mission of the CIA operative. John Solomon says there will be a follow-up article to this as it relates to the Steele dossier. Solomon has already given us a peek in that Deripaska brushed off the notion that Trump colluded with Russia. But we'll have to talk about that next week as we've reached the end of this podcast. And that will do it for this week. The next podcast will be available on Wednesday, May 23rd.